Another domestic terror attack. We got the latest on the shooting in Las Vegas.
And the analysis is in. What's the Trump-Ryan tax plan going to do to our taxes?
And the founder and president of Hell's Kitchen Democrats and New York drag superstar Marti Allen-Cummings is here to discuss their efforts to get progressive Democrats elected and the recent election upset in the city. It's Tuesday, October 3rd. Welcome to the Political Beat.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hey guys, welcome to AfterBuzz TV's The Political Beat, the millennial show and podcast, breaking down the latest in Washington politics and news from around the country and around the world. Happy October. It's Happy Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Happy LGBT History Month, and Happy Mean Girls Day
I can't believe we included that one.
You have to include that one because it's Mean Girls Day. It's October 3rd. I'm your host, Drexel Hurd, the semi-moderate voice of this show. On the left, you can follow me on social media at Drexel Hurd.
And I'm at Chelsea Galicia, the lefter of the left.
The far lefter of the left. Where can they follow you?
Are you pushing me away?
I was pushing the left.
Shoving at Chelsea Galicia. I sort of did the name and the social media all in one.
All in one.
Foul
because it's all this. Yeah,
we got to get Marti on.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this interview.
Just some quick housekeeping items. Be sure to check out last week's episode. Amanda Littman from Run for Something, her new book, Don't Just March, Run for Something, a real guide to fixing the system yourself. Hit the virtual shelves today. Also next week, we're very excited for this interview. Gubernatorial candidate John Chang joins us to discuss his campaign and his ideas for the state. We've got a really good October of guests. I'm very excited. Beto O'Rourke from Texas. Kevin De Leon is coming on this month. So we got a lot going on this month. But we're going to start with today's episode with our interview, which we don't normally do. Then we'll get into some headlines today. And in the breakdown, we're going to talk about the GOP's tax proposal, how it will affect millennials. And then in the spotlight, we've got Breast Cancer Awareness Month and the importance of getting you or someone in your family to the doctor. But we do know, based on this show, that political interest and involvement post-election has hit a fever pitch with groups like Run for Something, Our Revolution, I know Chelsea likes that, and others emerging to make their mark on the future of the country. One of those groups, Hell's Kitchen Democrats, formed in the heart of Manhattan, taking New York politics by storm. I've watched it from the ground up. And here to talk about the group's future is the founder and president, New York drag superstar, and my good friend. I've known him for many, many years, Mr. Marti Allen-Cummings. Welcome to the Political Beat.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
I am good. I'm trying to hail a cab right now. I'm multitasking.
What a multitasker.
I love it. So, Marti, real quick. So thanks for coming on the show today. So tell us how Hell's Kitchen Democrats started for you, and how has the club grown since you guys started it?
The club started because Donald Trump took an escalator ride down from Trump Tower and called an entire group of people rapists and drug dealers. And I was like, this is bullshit. And I was never really political before. Then the election happened. Everybody was very shocked. On all sides, I think there was a lot of shock. And I put it out there on Facebook. I said, we need to have a club in Hell's Kitchen because I don't see a very active one right now. My friend said, let's do it in my living room. We had like 15 people there, and now we have hundreds of members, and we won an election, and it's like really awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I know that
it's grown a lot.
Yeah, like I said at the top of the show, like I've watched Hell's Kitchen Democrats grow, at least just through Facebook. And I mean, I'm not even a member of Hell's Kitchen Democrats, yet I do follow the page because I always want to know what you guys are doing. Tell us some of the issues.
It's great.
It's great. Yeah, it's amazing. I keep trying to get Marti to let me come to a club meeting.
Hold on 1 second. I just got in my cab.
Busy man.
Yeah.
This is New York, girl. We are multitasking.
I know. I know you got to do it. I know you got a lot coming up this week, which we're going to talk about in a second. What are some of the issues that you're hearing from Hell's Kitchen residents, and that
we
they're
want to
really
make
focused on?
sure our neighborhood is Trump-proof. That is what we're working on. We want to make sure people who are part of DACA are taken care of. Make sure people who are affected by ICE raids are taken care of. We want to make sure if you're at risk with health care, we want to make sure you're getting your health care that you need. We want to make sure our our city and neighborhood is protected from the craziness happening in Washington.
So are you guys focused on, because it's in the heart of Hell's Kitchen, for folks that don't know or have never been to Hell's Kitchen before, it's basically the theater district. It's basically a huge LGBT centric area. Are you guys we talk a lot about identity politics. Are you guys not necessarily focused on LGBT issues at the heart of Hell's Kitchen, but so it sounds like you're expanding.
We are a neighborhood group, but we also know that politics starts locally. So what we do will trickle from our neighborhood to the city at large, to the state, to the nation. Everything starts at a local level, and that's what we're really working to do. So in essence, yes, we are focused on neighborhood issues, but with that, like, what you spoke about earlier, what happened in Las Vegas, what is our city doing to prevent gun violence? What is our state doing, which then affects our nation? We have to make sure there's no reason somebody should have a semi-automatic weapon or an automatic weapon. There's no reason. We don't need that. I'm tired of the NRA buying out our politicians, and this goes for Republicans and Democrats. We need to get people who are going to actually protect us in office, and so our club is working for that.
If somebody is interested in joining, but they're a little hesitant because they don't really know what's going to be required of them, what would you say to them?
All that's required to show up and ask questions. Be inquisitive. If you're nervous to ask a question, listen, take note. Politics is not just for politicians. Politics is not just for politicians. They work for us, the people. It's our job to get involved. And so people are hesitant, I didn't know diddly crap about politics until I got into this. They're just like, your first couple of meetings, just listen, volunteer. It's as simple as like bringing a package of diapers for Puerto Rico or getting names on a petition. You can do whatever you feel comfortable and capable of doing.
Yeah, you guys just did a whole voter registration drive over the weekend, which seemed to be pretty successful. I think you had like almost 40 people sign up from what I saw. It looked amazing. You guys you guys also had a recent election for new district leaders, knocking off one of the most prominent Democratic families, the McManus family.
Yeah, 120-year dynasty.
Crazy.
Wow.
What do you think made you guys so successful in that election?
I think we were successful because people saw that there was people in office, this district leader position. It's a very hyper-local position, but there was people in office who said they were progressive when they really weren't progressive, and they weren't doing their job. Our congressman got up at our meeting and said he hadn't heard from them in 2 or 3 years, and their job is to be a liaison between the people and our elected officials. So if our Congress members aren't hearing from them for several years, our assembly members aren't hearing from them, they're not doing their job. We need new leadership, and the people knew that.
Wow. So, Drexel, you said clone earlier, and that's the word that comes to mind when I hear you talk. I wish that we could clone you and have more citizens like you who go from, I don't know what the heck politics is all about, but I know that it's not going well right now, and I am going to get educated and do something about it.
Yeah, that's why it's not going well. So many people said, oh, she'll win, I don't need to vote, or, oh, I don't need to vote in this local election, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Not just presidential elections matter, but all the people, when they live in, for example, I live in New York. It goes blue in the presidential thing, so people might say, I'm not going to go out in the presidential election because my vote doesn't count. They're going to get the electoral thing anyway. Well, if enough people say that, it will turn red.
Right.
So you have to vote in every election. That's the beauty. We live in a democracy to do that.
Right.
So vote.
It's
your duty.
That's great, and like I said, we, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because watching Hell's Kitchen Democrats grow has been very exciting to watch.
I'm sure it has a lot to do with your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've known you for years, and I know you got to go here in a second. So last question, this Thursday, because Marty is not only a political foe now in New York City, he's also one of New York's premier drag queens. Thursday is the premiere of your new show, Shade Queens of New York City, on Fusion.
I'm very excited. I'm on my way to film a scene for it right now.
So you're starring in it and you're producing it. What is the show about? Like, what can you tell us about the show?
The show follows 8 drag queens, myself being one of them. I'm also a producer. I'm very grateful. The show follows 8 drag queens on our journey. We want to show people that drag queens are underneath the wig and the lashes and the heels and the makeup. We are people who deal with everyday issues like everybody else. We have marriage issues, financial issues, family issues, job stress. Like, we are dealing with real human issues, and we want to humanize drag. We want to show a side to it that's never been shown before.
And maybe one day soon, a drag congressperson. And Marti Allen-Cummings.
Maybe.
Wow. I can see it now. Nice planting of the seed, Drexel.
Well, listen, I know, like I said, I've known Marti for, he's been talking about it for a little while now. So, but I know you got to go, Marti. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you so much for your time.
So much.
Tell Blake we said hello.
I will. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. See you later.
Best of luck.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Man, his passion is just like contagious.
Yeah, it's great. You know, and it's so interesting to watch because, you know, Marti and I met Tim and I have been together for almost 8 years,
Jeez.
7 years. So, I mean,
I can't believe Tim has been with you for that long.
I know.
Goodness
I don't know how.
He deserves a medal.
Yeah, me too. But I knew Marti before Tim. So I've known Marti for almost a decade. And you know, to watch Marti go from where I saw him in almost a decade ago to where he is now. It's like
no political interest.
Having no political interest, and to now, you know, taking down a political dynasty is impressive work.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, what you said, which was, you know, to what Marti said was anybody can do it. We just heard him talk about Shade Queens of LA. People see drag queens in a certain light, just kind of like what they see, you know, the Donald Trump coming down the escalator piece, what they feel like they believe a Mexican American to be, or a Black American to be, or anybody. We think Asian Americans are smart, blah, 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 whatever. And you have drag queens in a certain light, but you don't really know that, you don't really think of them as
regular human beings
because they're performing. And I think that has a lot to do with celebrity too. We don't think celebrity, you know, people talk, why are celebrities getting into politics? Well, at the end of the day,
they're still
celebrities are citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Football players are citizens. They still have a right to do whatever they want to do, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't, I mean, and we talked about it, you know, you don't lose your right to speak out because you have a platform. That actually should be the time that you use to speak out.
One of the best parts about Marti is that before this, he had no idea about politics.
Right.
I know a lot of people that are a little hesitant to jump in because they think there's so much to know and that they are not an expert, and so what can they really contribute? And I mean, Marti sounds so knowledgeable, and he just barely started learning about this, so I hope that inspires more people to jump into the game.
Not only jump into it, but like we had Amanda on last week, if you're interested in running for office, you have the resources to do that. There are plenty of organizations out there who are looking for candidates like Marti to get involved.
Are we ready for the headlines?
What's been going on?
Oh, God, this America's most recent mass shooting has been the worst shooting or mass shooting in modern American history. Not all of American history, but modern American history, with 59 dead, about 527 people injured. I was frankly relieved in the moment that I found out that it was a white male shooter.
Right.
And the conversation
about
Isn't
that sad that we have to think like, please? I mean, I remember when the DC shooter happened, and black people were like, please don't let it be a black person. And then as these domestic terrorism situations start to happen around the country, every minority group is like, please don't let it be one of us.
Yeah.
But we know statistically who does what ethnicity in America commits the most mass shootings.
White men.
White men. And this whole Las Vegas thing is really crazy. But we started to have these conversations about, you know, especially during the football piece of it, during the take a knee piece of it, and people are like, oh, people should worry, or black people should worry more about black on black crime. If you look at the numbers, there are less black men that are probably, if you look at the numbers statistically, but there that are, yes, black on black crime, whatever.
But the thing is that every ethnicity, the most likely person to kill them is somebody of the same ethnicity.
Right.
That's true of Black America, White America,
But
Hispanic.
you don't hear black people saying, look at white on white crime, because we know those numbers are large. Not only white on white murders, domestic numbers are higher in the white male ethnicity group.
Right.
There are other crimes other than violent crimes, and we know that the numbers for white males is higher. And for this guy in Vegas, people were like, but he doesn't even look like he would commit this crime.
Right.
I'm like, what is that? I'm like, what does that mean?
A retired accountant, I heard, that it was a multimillionaire real estate investor.
Right.
That sounds like my mother. But, I mean, minus the white guy part. She's a Mexican woman, retired accountant, multimillionaire real estate investor.
Your mom is a white
No.
male real estate
But
investor.
I have been really fascinated by sort of the word that precedes him, like lone gunman,
Right.
or the shooter, or it's not any charged
What did I
word.
read? He had a
like,
quiet life.
like, you know, and the word terrorism is not being used here. And I actually read about why it's not being called domestic terrorism, even though my initial feeling was like, this is totally domestic terrorism. And I looked at the definition, and ironically enough, even though there's like a federal kind of definition of domestic terrorism, there's no crime attached to it. You have to be convicted of other things. So the title domestic terrorism doesn't actually have a lot of legal implication, but it does have a lot of implication for how the public views these kinds of events. And if we call it terrorism, then people are more alarmed about it, because as we can see, we're banning people, we want walls, because we think that if we keep the others out, that we'll be safer. Well, clearly we're destroying ourselves from the inside out.
Right.
But the definition, did you know this, of a domestic
I've
terrorism?
seen it plenty, because white folks like to pretend, they like to throw out the definition when it suits, when they don't want to talk about the fact that white people are domestic terrorists.
Well, I mean, I guess there is a way to
not all white people.
to see it as domestic terrorism, but in order to be so, it has to be an intimidation or forceful way to move citizens in the direction that the terrorist wants, either politically or not, just
Right.
to change behavior.
Because they were waiting on the motive. People kept asking, and particularly the Las Vegas sheriffs were asking for the motive. They were like, we got to wait on the motive before we call it what it is. Well, you didn't wait for the motive in Orlando.
I mean, that was really quick.
Right,
in,
right. I mean,
2 days.
We just didn't wait for motives in any other. We didn't wait for the motive for the shooter in Texas, in Dallas. White people just love to wait for things that. I was listening to something today where somebody said, we don't. What did they say? It was something about. I can't remember, but they love to wait for something to kind of fit their narrative. The White House, I mean, if you look at what's happening in Puerto Rico, the White House waited so they could spin something
Right.
to get what they wanted out. And in this case, I think that's what's been happening is people don't want to admit what they know to be true.
And it's scary, because if you identify with this, deranged person because you share an ethnicity, it's kind of scares you, because we generally want to believe that people who are like us are good people. And when we find out that not all of them are, it can be a bit of a slap in the face.
I say it time and time again, not only on this show, but on the Trump Report, that we believe, and I said this on Facebook today, people believe that Americans are inherently good, and we are just not.
Well, and actually, I saw a quote that it's like the best of America only comes out when we see the worst of America, because all these stories of heroism and people being there for complete strangers as they're dying are really amazing stories where we do hear the best of America.
Right.
But it's too bad that it always has to be in conjunction with something that's terrible.
And of course, the White House and their propaganda machine that mimics the Russian and North Korean propaganda machines is pretty good. I mean, if you see the shit coming out of the White House, like these little videos that the White House posts, I don't know if you follow the White House on Facebook or whatever,
No.
but they post these elaborate videos as if all is right with the world. And it's like I watched yesterday the Trumps. I mean, it was great. It was fine. This moment of silence on the White House, on the right outside the north portico, the south, whatever, right above underneath the Truman balcony, and I was like, yes, this is great, fine. It literally lasted a minute, but basically it was
Optics
it was an
only.
optics only situation, and particularly when you've got a president who says the shit that he says half the time. AP just had a thing that just came up. It says Las Vegas shooter had devices attached to 12 weapons, allowing semi-automatic rifles to mimic fully automatic gunfire.
So that means
That's
that
the AFT. That's from the AFT. That's not like people made it up. That's not like the news made it up. That's from the ATF. I'm sorry.
So that means that he took guns that were not automatic and made them automatic, or these were semi-automatic and he made them automatic.
I think that this was just a. It's
You're supposed to know all this stuff
sorry.
as a military
I mean,
kid.
it was
Or that's what I expect, but I have
12 weapons
no idea.
allowing semi-automatic rifles to fully. So they were semi-automatic and they were made to be fully automatic.
So of course, this kind of, talking about what kind of gun and how many guns and what happened with these guns brings about the whole debate again over gun control. And I know that when I suggested to you, hey, Drexel, we should really talk about the political implications of this, and you were like, sorry to tell you, but there aren't going to be any.
Right. We look at it and we go, we talk about gun control. Like people are always like, well, now is not the time to talk about gun control. We didn't say that after every other, something happens. Travel gets either ethnicity or religion is banned, or we ban things on flights or different things like that, or people locked down.
I saw that. Yeah, we need to be free to do whatever we want, screams a country that bans toothpaste or
Right.
too much toothpaste on
Right.
flights. I took that from somebody else's social media post, so I can't claim credit for it. But yeah, when you look at our sort of ironies or hypocrisies, it is kind of funny, not literally funny.
Not funny.
And so I know that very likely this Congress is not going to do anything about gun control.
Well,
In
no,
fact,
this week they were supposed to vote on an NRA
Rolling it
backed
back.
bill rolling back silencers. Why? Why would you? What's the point? There is nothing. Somebody made a point that said, if Nancy Pelosi actually said, she said, why would a hunter
need
a silencer? If the argument is
To
it's
not
for
scare
hunting
off.
only, if it's hunting based, and people, listen, I'm always open to hearing the views of Second Amendment go-getters. But if you are in the woods, if for 100, 200, 300 years, people have been or however long guns have been around, whatever, people have been using guns to hunt with, and there has been no silencer on them, what's going to start now? Nothing's going to change.
If you're not a good hunter,
Then
and you're
it's not gonna change,
with a
right.
silencer. And yeah, somebody brought up that point. Can you imagine if there had been a silencer on on these guns in
Right.
Vegas?
Could-
How
and-
many more people
Not
may
only
be
that,
dead?
but could you imagine? And I don't know. Again, I'm not a hunter. I don't shoot guns. I do go to the gun range every once in a while. But I only shoot the Glocks, and that's like a super easy like child's play, not child's play, but the novice shooting. But could you imagine that once we roll back the ban on silencers, have somebody developing a way for semi-automatic and automatic rifles to have a silencer on them? I don't know if that's a thing.
Scary. Yeah.
It might be a thing, but that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you'll never know where it's coming from.
Right. Okay, so then this takes us into the reasons why are we so stuck? Why couldn't we do anything even, in the last administration when we had a president that wanted to do something about gun control? And the reason, I think we all know this by now, is the NRA, right?
Money,
okay,
money,
and
money.
I saw a post, and I don't know how accurate it was, about the list of congressmen and women who'd received money from the NRA, and I kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
I mean, there's only 100 of them, and I bet all 100 at some point has got some money from the NRA.
Just so many of them. And it's not even the amount of money that they give them, it's that they endorse them at all. That endorsement from the NRA means a lot. And if you are not on the side of the NRA, they will bury you.
Right.
They will endorse your opponent, they will fund your opponent, you will go down. And so the way that they go about like going after people is
all based on lies, first of all, obviously. And, you know,
Like the lies about they're going to come take your
right.
guns.
I said, and then somebody said today, Wayne LaPierre, who's the head of the NRA, doesn't have the argument that Obama or some Democrat's going to come take away your guns. Gun sales have actually decreased since Donald Trump has taken office. Since Donald Trump has taken office. But since the shooting, stocks have doubled or tripled since
it's a really
gun stocks have doubled.
Well, people get scared after these shootings, and a lot of people go out and buy guns. So gun sales are actually augmented by these mass shootings, which is kind of scary and a little sick. So, anyways, when I keep peeling back the layers of this onion, okay, NRA. One step further, why are they able to do all of this? Because of the rules in money and politics. And so, as always, Drexel, if there's an opportunity for me to harp on the fact that money and politics bears on every last issue,
which is true. However, I go back to the fact that you can't get money out of politics until Supreme Court makes a decision on Citizens United. It's just not going to happen. Or Congress legislates that. You can't do a constitutional amendment. That's just not going to happen.
Well, politically, there's already a movement to
movements are very different. Movements are very different than getting, because if everybody doesn't know how a constitutional amendment actually gets taken care of, you actually have to get it past the Congress. Then you actually got to get it past two-thirds of the states. And the idea right now, Democrats don't control enough state legislatures. Democrats don't control enough governors' houses to get anything past their state, to get their state legislature even on board to do that. So I think that people have to remember, yes, these ideas, at least in my opinion, these ideas that great. Let's do a constitutional amendment. Hillary Clinton talked about it. Bernie Sanders talked about it. Barack Obama talked about it. Every Democrat has talked about overturning Citizens United. What we cannot do is
it's not just Citizens United. This madness started before, but it just got
worse.
Those
things cannot be accomplished if there are if Democrats or whoever who are for those things are not in office to do them.
Okay, let me ask you this. How did the LGBT movement begin? Did it start in Congress?
Yeah, but social movements, I think, are very different than other types of movements. Civil rights, LGBT rights, women's rights, all those are kind of social movements. I think when you're talking about, and we talked about on the show before in terms of money, moving money, where we talk about how much things actually cost. We know, and when Eric was here the other day, we know that TV ads cost a lot of money. People need to get their word out. In 2017, it's very difficult to get your word out a little.
So now you're talking about campaign finance. Well, we can't even get to campaign finance unless
But the money is campaign finance.
And the reason why we can't create any campaign finance laws that stick is because they keep getting struck down by the Supreme Court.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to get everybody to think from the political standpoint. Everybody's thinking from here instead of from here half the time. And we got to think from here and here.
I think if you were to look at how much has been accomplished by the folks, by the organizations, trying to help bring about this constitutional amendment, you'd be surprised at how far they've gone.
You need organizations with a lot of heft. And right now there's no organization that is doing that.
Well, maybe none that you've heard of.
The fact that I haven't heard of them?
Go to represent.us.
Represent, okay. The fact that they're not a national, the fact that they're not like HRC, the fact that they're not like some of those bigger organizations. If we're not hearing about them on a national stage, not these underground like progressive sites.
Look at here in California, what we did in the last election, there was a voter initiative to. That we said we want to overturn Citizens United. You know, it's just like
and
sort of
fine,
it's like an announcement.
That, but it's not even. But that's common sense to Democrats.
Well, this constitutional amendment is a little common sense.
But yeah,
too.
California can do that.
It's going well. The reason why it's going to take a while is because they have to go in and clean up the corruption state by state. Once the corruption in each state is cleaned up, then the people who go to Congress are then clean. I'm using air quotes here. And then that's how you change that's the idea about changing Congress in such a way.
The idea, but not the reality. Very different things. Oh. But speaking of
reality. At one point people thought it was impossible for women to vote, for Black people to have civil rights.
Women didn't think that. Again, at least just in my opinion, social movements are very different than moving money, and money is the.
If enough people recognize that money in politics has to do with their voting rights and recognize that it's a civil right of voting, then more people might get their butts in gear to do something about it.
I don't disagree with you. What I am saying is that when a group, it becomes national and they are nationally formed and they are nationally pushed. Like we talked about Black Lives Matter a lot. Black Lives Matter is a national group that has no leader. It's very difficult to get a majority of people behind you. If we can't even get a majority of people to recognize, not a majority of people, but a good chunk of right wing or Republicans to recognize that Black and brown lives actually matter, what makes you think that we're going to be able to, on that side, on actual people, what makes you think that people are going to move the needle on the Republican side for that side? I mean, that's just what, I mean, in my head.
We can go back and forth all day.
Yeah. Just a couple of other quick things in the news. Congress missed the deadline on CHIP.
Children's Health Insurance Program. It helps 9 million kids be covered that don't qualify for Medicaid. And the deadline to sort of renew it was September 30th, the same deadline for their Obamacare repeal. And so this sort of just went ignored.
I bet it didn't even go ignored. I bet you that they knew it was coming. This is a Hillary Clinton pride and joy piece. The idea that Republicans over this last few years over these past few months have been rolling back the progress of Barack Obama, and now the progress of anything that Hillary Clinton had her name on is not surprising to me. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the U.S. voted against the UN ban on death penalty as it's LGBT History Month. U.S. voted against the UN ban on death penalty for homosexuality, joining countries like Iraq, China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Like there was like a handful of like crazy countries, and then everybody else was over here, and then Nikki Haley did a John McCain thumbs down, and thought it would be a good idea
just
to do.
On the idea of banning homosexuals for being homosexuals, not like homosexuals who like commit crimes you can't kill, just for being. I don't know, Drexel. I still I haven't seen it for myself. I almost can't believe you that's.
You have to look it up. It's crazy.
But what's really so is this crazy tax plan, again, air quotes, because I'm not sure you can really call it a hashed out plan. Even Republicans talking on the Sunday morning talk show circuits are like, this isn't fully fleshed out. We don't really know. We can't promise that people's taxes won't go up. We'll have to see, la, 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 la. But there has been some analysis done. And so we know how bad it actually is.
Right.
We know that it claims to.
Well, let's talk about where we are right now, before we get into proposed changes, because I want everybody to understand where their money kind of goes right now. The current tax bracket is broken up into seven different tax brackets. So starting from 39% for those making $418,000 a year to 10% for those making less than $10,000 a year. We know that based on economic data that a majority of millennials like us, on average, make just about $30,000 a year. It's like $600 a week or something like that. That puts millennials in the 15% tax bracket, which means they're bringing about $25,000 a year, which is like next to nothing. Families in 2017 are averaging about $60,000 to $80,000 a year. That's families of four and stuff like that. Putting them in the 25% tax bracket, which if you're making $60,000 a year, you're likely pulling in around $45,000 a year, which is, for a family of four, you got college.
Well, that's below the median,
it's crazy.
Which is about $56,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does this plan do?
Yeah.
I understand the need for simplification, but I don't understand simplifying the 3 tax brackets. I don't think the 7 tax brackets is where the simplification is needed. They got
it from the 999 guy. Remember that?
Okay.
What was his name? I mean, it was not 999, but like the simplification. Republicans think that things should be simple, just like their people.
Okay, nicely played. And this does decrease taxes, but in every tax bracket, but by just a couple of percentage points. not really anything to make a difference, but it looks like it lowers taxes, so some people get excited about this.
Right.
But it also wipes out some of the deductions that you were able to take before that brought down your tax liability. So the consequence of this is that the poorest 1/5 of Americans will probably see their tax liability go down by 0.5%.
But because we're breaking it down into three, and I know we've got the graphic up, the 35, 25, 12%, that group taxes where they were at 10% is going up by 2% to match people who are making almost triple
what they are
making.
It makes no sense. That's why I don't understand this part of the simplification thing. So what this does, though, is brings down the top 1%'s tax liability by 8.5%. That is a big difference. So as much as they're coming out telling you that this is a tax break for the middle class, it is absolutely not.
Right.
And they're saying, okay, we're bringing down the corporate tax rate because we've got the highest one in the world from 35% down to 20%. And you're like, that sounds great. That sounds smart. That sounds logical. Except, and this is the thing that's so sad about the loss of critical thinking skills in our country, except if you look just a little beneath the surface, you would know that half of corporations don't even pay taxes because it's passed through. It goes down to shareholders. And the ones that do effectively pay 15%.
Right.
So this isn't going to make the difference that people think it's going to make. What it is going to do is increase the deficit by, I've heard estimates of like $4 to $6 trillion over 10 years. And so because it's going to impact the deficit in that way, they're going to need 60 votes to pass this. Not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, although I don't think they need 60 votes to pass this because I think that they're attaching it to a budget bill.
And so if it doesn't increase the deficit, then it would only need 50 votes.
Correct.
And
Republicans are really trying to push this 50-vote threshold right now.
Yeah, I know, but the Freedom Caucus is like excited about this, and so that means that there's going to be a lot of moderates who are not.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I think the Republicans want to win this year, so I think that they're going to do whatever they can to do that. Because, and it goes back to something that you just talked about, the corporate tax rate. You know, the Republican argument, we know that trickle-down economics doesn't work. It has not worked. But
case in point, Kansas.
Right. But yeah, Sam Brownback's Kansas, the
failed experiment.
The experimental grounds for Republican policies from the Heritage Foundation. But we also know that, from something that we said earlier, that we believe that people are inherently good. In this case, people believe that corporations or people that are running corporations are inherently good. So in the American psyche, people believe that if the taxes are going to be lowered for corporations, that somehow corporations are going to put that money back into hiring people.
And it doesn't
work that way. That money will go back into shareholders first,
Yeah.
Then they got to pay the employees that they do have, because they want to keep those people happy, and so then they run out of all this money, and then they can maybe hire like 100.
The reason why corporations hire more employees is when demand goes up, and how you have demand goes up is you have more money in the middle class that they can spend.
Right.
Because people in the middle class spend more of their money, percentage-wise, than people in the upper classes, and so. This is like a whole economics lessons right here, but people look back and, well, not a lot of us were alive then, but like look at Reaganomics. That was an application of this trickle-down theory that seemed to have worked. But back then, they reduced corporate taxes from 70% to 35%. It's not going to be the same impact from 35 to 20.
That and the cost of everything is so much. You can't be competitive. People can't be competitive, or corporations can't be competitive if they're not spending money on the outside. And in this case, not only spending money on the outside, but keeping the wages of their employees low enough to where they can reach their, I want to say overhead, but yeah.
This is just, I am really
the one thing that's
afraid.
Really that's crazy that I know that we talked about the other day is that this whole plan eliminates the estate. Eliminates the state tax on inherited wealth over $5 million.
Currently, it's 5.5.
5.5, which, according to the Office of Management and Budget, generates about $20 billion a year, which we know that could pay for health care in America at any single-payer, Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, whatever, if we just kept that going, because, you know.
And it only affects about 5,000 taxpayers a year.
That we know of.
Yeah, I think it's less than 5,000.
That we know of that aren't shipping their money over to Switzerland or something like that.
Speaking of, there'd be a tax holiday for corporations to supposedly bring their money back from overseas.
But I also read somewhere that, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I read that there is a clause that allows corporations to not be taxed on
Earnings.
sending on employees from overseas.
That I don't
I read
know
it because
about.
somebody said yes that you know, because everybody was arguing the fact that Trump had been America First policy, blah blah blah. But to have this, I mean, obviously these are things. These are, just to be very clear, this is their framework plan. This is where Republicans have pitched it out. Now they got to get enough members to kind of fill in the gaps and or sign on to this thing. So that clause might not be a thing, but I believe I heard that somebody had proposed in this current plan that jobs overseas would not be taxed.
I have heard that income earned overseas would not be taxed. But here's the thing: this is so full of giveaways for the rich, loopholes. Which, ironically, Trump says that the deficit will be covered by closing loopholes and by the increase in the economy, which is not going to happen.
And increasing the standard deduction.
Right, but still, even if doubling the standard deduction still doesn't drop your tax liability in reality because of all the other deductions that it gets rid of that we used to use.
And for those that don't know what a standard deduction is, it is the dollar amount that reduces. It's the dollar amount that reduces the amount of income on which you are taxed and varies according to your filing status. For example, if you're single with no kids, like us, our standard deduction before we're taxed is just over $6,000. Under the new plan, it would double to $12,000. Somehow married. According to this plan, right now, somehow married with no children and married with children on the same old and new plans sit around the same, which is a little interesting. But according to this plan, to offset the increase, the plan seeks to eliminate other deductions like the state and local deduction that larger states, California, New York, it's really trying to hit the Democratic states. And people like to think that they aren't thinking about, if you out there believe that Republicans aren't thinking of the political needle or knife that they can drive into their Democratic counterparts, you're crazy. Like you're not thinking properly. Like states like New York, Governor Cuomo has already said this would significantly impact the state of New York, which we know if you live in New York City like Marti, hailing a cab, who probably 10 years ago would have taken the subway. We know that the MTA has gotten worse since 2007, 2006, until 2017. It's gotten worse. Things should not get worse in terms of automation. Things should get better in America in terms of automation. We hope. And so I think that California would be hit, Washington State,
and so
Florida,
just to clarify what this means, currently right now you can deduct what you pay in state income taxes from your federal tax liability. But this rule would take that out. So you could not deduct what you paid in state taxes.
Yeah. Something I also want to bring up before we move on. You brought up the corporate tax rate coming down from 35 to 20, which is where Paul Ryan doing his keg stands has been wanting probably since he's been doing keg stands.
This is when that's a reference to he said in
it
his
in the
college
campaign. Yeah, he said
in
in
his
college.
college days that he was doing keg stands, waiting for
thinking about cutting taxes
and Social Security.
Yeah, but. Think about it. According to the CBO has projected that in 2017, this year, the corporate taxes would bring in about $310 billion, while individual income tax, ours, would bring in $1.6 trillion. To lower the corporate tax rate on the backs so that typical individuals could make up the difference is insane to me.
And they're going to do their best to sell it like snake oil salesmen, and we're just going to have to see if America's smart enough to see through it.
But it goes back to what we said. I think that an argument that, Barack Obama tried to make this argument during his 8 years, or at least the beginning of the 8 years, when he kind of went on that apology tour, and people were like, "Why is he apologizing for everything?" Barack Obama tried to pinpoint what we talked about earlier, which is America is not. There are a lot of things that we don't like. We think that we would spend our money on somebody else. Like we would go out of our way to help other people, but a majority of Americans would rather keep their money than to help somebody else out. That's the American psyche, which is why we have this argument over healthcare.
That's true, but to some degree, I understand people in the middle class who feel that they're having to carry people making less money when
That's because there is no middle class.
When they're having a hard time, taking care of themselves.
So then my question would be to those people, why would you even vote for Republicans who are seeking to lower the taxes for the people above you who are supposed if you can't think of this, if you're here, if you're at the top, if you're the middle class and you're helping below you, who's going to help the person above the middle class? That's what the people have to think about. Because if you're not sitting there being like, well, I'm helping somebody else, and you're thinking, oh, I don't want the people at the top helping me.
I mean, I think people are easily sold on the idea of cutting taxes. And when Republicans say, I'm going to cut taxes, that perks up people's ears because they're the most sort of intimate relationship that individuals have with the government is through taxes.
Right.
And that's like the only thing that they really feel that happens. They pay taxes and they don't get anything out of it.
Right.
They don't understand roads and all the things that we do get from it.
Right.
But people are easily sold on let's cut taxes and that's going to make everything better.
I would also argue that people are easily sold on the idea of personal responsibility. People, particularly males, feel like if they cannot provide for their family, they don't want somebody else providing for them.
Oh, that's interesting.
And in that mindset, people feel like if they're getting a government handout, then they would not. Then they feel like that's not their responsibility. That's not the government's responsibility to do that. That's their responsibility.
Right.
But if you can't even make ends meet to be able to, like, how? At some point you got to think. People have got to start thinking the logical way of
but
providing.
I think you
for their
raise a really interesting point. This whole, traditionally male, and maybe it's not just culturally traditional, but it's like biological drive for, men to provide thing is a stronger force on people than logic.
Right.
And this is sort of what made sense of all these people who wanted to repeal Obamacare when it was going to cut their own health insurance.
Right.
It's because they didn't want to be helped by the government. They want to be able to take care of themselves.
But at the same time, they also if the other part of that argument is if insurance companies weren't regulated by the government, who do they think was going to keep who do they think was going to keep their insurance low?
I think it's up for debate about whether Congress regulates the insurance companies or insurance companies regulate
Well,
Congress.
we know who regulates who. And it's not Congress regulating the insurance companies. Excuse me. Paul Ryan on the Sunday morning talk shows this weekend said that he could not guarantee. This is kind of the shit that people need to be listening to. Paul Ryan could not guarantee that the taxes on the middle class families would not go up under the Trump-Ryan plan. If people do not start calling it the Trump-Ryan plan, I'm going to be so mad.
Oh,
Because people need to tie Paul Ryan to Donald Trump every conversation is through this process.
this is a mandate.
Paul Ryan has been waiting on this moment. He's been waiting on a Republican president since he became Speaker of the House. This is his moment. This is his shining opportunity. If it seems like Republicans are going down a rabbit hole that is going to hurt the average American family, it is because of Paul Ryan and Donald Trump, and people should not forget about that going into 2018. midterm elections.
Well, I certainly will not.
Even though they won't feel the effects of the Trump-Ryan plan
For a while.
for a little while, know that corporations will be taken care of, the 1% will be taken care of, your family will not be taken care of, so let's not pretend like your family's going to be taken care of, because Republicans have not been taking care of the average American family forever.
And here's the challenge for us. How do we, in a non-condescending way, explain to people that this plan is bad for them and that they are being lied to when they are led to believe that this is going to reduce their
That's
taxes?
funny you said that, because I said something like that this weekend. We were having a conversation with my friend Vanja. I said maybe Democrats should just come up with just a straightforward slogan, just like, this plan is gonna shut up. You know what I mean? It's just gonna screw your life up. Democrats at some point either they can't tiptoe anymore around it. Just come out and say it, rip the Band-Aid off, let the American people know that it's gonna.
But Republicans say no, it's not gonna make your life worse.
Lies.
I know, but how do we convince people that they're being lied to? They almost don't want to see it.
Well, like I said, people don't want to admit the truth, because they believe, like you said at the top of the show, that people are inherently good, and they do not believe that they believe that Americans are inherently good. And it's kind of sad.
And if somebody believes in this tax plan, actually just say Kansas. Google Kansas economy and just then silence.
Right.
Allow awkward silence
Crazy.
until they do that.
So we'll kind of be watching this kind of tax plan situation over the next few months, and we'll revisit it. We'll bring people on to talk about, like, tax. We had a tax expert on earlier this year from Stanford. We'll probably bring him back to kind of talk about where things are.
Let's turn to the spotlight
But what I do
now.
I do want to talk briefly. Like I said at the top of the show, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. As I mentioned in the cold open, but most know, I don't know if people have been watching this show from its first incarnation last year to this year. I've probably mentioned on the show before, my mom passed away from breast cancer, 2010, so almost 7 years ago, and from triple negative breast cancer, which is like, right now, like the worst of the worst right now, because it metastasizes so fast. So instead of, I know now we normally highlight organizations on the show or people or whatever, but I thought it was important just to kind of spotlight the importance of mammograms and the necessity to get checked yearly by your doctor, particularly for women. Men can get breast cancer too, but we know that women take the biggest hit in the country, and it's super important for those to get out there. I was telling Chelsea at the top of the show, my mom, breast cancer doesn't run in the family. It came out of nowhere.
And you said your mom was
super
really
healthy, like ran every day. I would talk to her, what are you doing? Oh, she's walking around the track, and she kind of did that every day, and it kind of came out of nowhere. So if people think that they're immune to certain diseases, we know that some of the hardest hit diseases, whether or not it's breast cancer, whether or not it's prostate cancer, whether or not it's any kind of cancer, comes out of nowhere in some of the healthiest people. But to curb that, folks got to get out there and get checked. We know that while treatments are getting better and more advanced, cancer, like I said, has a mind of its own. And so definitely have a conversation with a primary care physician if you're a female or if you're a male. Visit your local Planned Parenthood. We don't hear that enough from people. Or another organization that provides excellent preventative care for women if you inherently believe that Planned Parenthood is not the place for you.
All right. Excellent advice.
Yeah. I know we talk about some of the other shows that come on the network. Trump Report right after this show, which we both will be on. Star Trek after show this Sunday. I've been watching Star Trek Discovery. It's amazing. And the DVR report on, I believe it's Saturdays, but I could be wrong, but you can check out the DVR report. AfterBuzz now has about 10 different channels now, from comedy to drama to reality TV, the reality competition. All of your favorite shows are going to be on those channels. So if you visit the AfterBuzzTV.com or if you visit the YouTube channel, you will see those shows broken up in there. If you can't find your show on the main page, definitely look for them in those specific channels.
Subcategories. Ours is, obviously you probably know already, otherwise you wouldn't be able to find us, but we're in Featured and Original.
Featured and Original is actually the main AfterBuzz page where we are the Trump Report, LGBTQ&A, and some of these other shows. But if you're looking for like Grey's Anatomy, go to drama. If you're looking for Real Housewives, you can go to the reality television. Television, Big Brother, reality competition show. All those shows are now based into the channel. You can follow AfterBuzz TV at AfterBuzz TV or email at info@afterbuzztv.com if you have any questions on that.
And you can follow the show at Political Beat TV.
Yeah, thanks to Marti Allen-Cummings for joining us on this week's show. Next week, we've got, like I said, John Chang. Leave your comments on YouTube and subscribe to Political Beat on iTunes podcast. Happy 25th anniversary to President and Mrs. Obama. We'll see you all next Tuesday right here on the Political Beat.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Keven Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit afterbuzztv.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
See you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.